Hello, everybody, and thanks for coming back to another episode of the Velo Podcast. I'm Mike Levy, and today we're going to talk about a new rule banning drop handlebars at the Leadville Trail 100. And speaking of the right handlebars on the wrong bike, we're also going to dig into Pinarello's new Grevil MX gravel bike. That's really just their Dogma hardtail frame with a drop handlebar. Not that there's anything wrong with that, right? Right?
You're giving it away here. This is the intro. This is to keep it light.
We're also going to do a deep dive into a gravel bike suspension by comparing the Cane Creek Invert, RockShox Rudy, and the Fox Tapercast 32 forks. Now, to do that, I've got Logan Jones-Wilkins with me today because he's been riding all three of these forks. Logan, I've also put a ton of time on all three of these things, so I think we're going to have a pretty nerdy conversation about how different they are from one another. But first, this is your first podcast with us, so I want you to do a quick intro.
Yeah.
Tell me.
Well, thank you for having me. First off, I've been a long-time listener, first-time caller. Maybe we can go with that to use classic
Perfect.
American radio parlance. But yeah, I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be on the Velo Podcast.
Great. Where are you, and what do you usually get up to? What kind of riding are you doing? What kind of bike you're riding? Give us the lowdown here.
Yeah, so I'm in Phoenix, Arizona. A little further south than both of you guys. So I'm in peak riding
God,
season.
I wish I was there.
Yeah, everyone
God.
does. Everyone does.
That'd be nice.
But Josh, you might see me in Portland when the calendar turns to June. So
True.
yeah, I started off as a road cyclist, and I've slowly been making my way towards more and more rugged terrain. Right now, I kind of did a little look back at my last year, and I almost did a perfect split of 200 hours on the gravel bike, 200 hours on the mountain bike, 200 hours on the road bike. So, I mean, there's probably like 50 or 60 hours there that I haven't accounted for that go one direction or the other. And these are all, I mean, I've ridden a lot of different bikes because I am a cycling journalist. We tend to do that. You know, we hop on different things all the time. So there's gray area between those things too. But I ride all the bikes, I think is the easiest way to describe it. And this year, especially, gravel bikes have been about suspension forks. I've been doing this testing since May, I think. So I've really grown to know them really well, love certain aspects of them, really not love other aspects of them. And I think I, interestingly, have finished the year feeling almost as skeptical and interested in suspension forks as I came into it. So yeah, maybe that shades our conversation a little bit too much, but I'm an omnivore when it comes to cycling.
Nice. Excellent. Excellent. I think this is going to be a good convo because we all come from obviously very different backgrounds. Myself, obviously a mountain biking background who basically lives on his gravel bike now. Yourself, you come from a road background who you're doing a ton of mountain biking now, or a ton of gravel riding as well too. And then we have the man who sleeps in his skin suit, Josh Ross.
That's
How are
right.
you doing, Josh?
I'm doing good. You know, what I am quite proud of is, and I should have an article about this soon. We've talked about it before, but my AI coach is kicking ass right now. I am like doing hard rides, recovering really well. Like I'm feeling really good on the bike.
If you could sum up the difference in how you were riding pre-AI coach to now, how would you, just in a couple sentences, how different is the training? What does it look like?
I mean, I'm embarrassed and it's so stupid, but it's just more
That's why I'm
polarized.
asking.
It's easier and harder, right? It just
Yeah.
And I knew that, but like it's shocking to see the change.
I've wondered with AI, like, do you feel the coaching knows you? Because for me, as a person who's been training cycling for a long time, I've always wondered if AI's best application is maybe not looking forward, but looking back and analyzing trends in training that I may have not picked up. But it seems like you're doing something different. So maybe the AI doesn't know you or doesn't care about your past. Has seen enough to be charting a new territory for you.
I am directing the AI. I do not let it take charge. That's the main thing that I'm doing differently, is that I'm the expert. I know how to train. I have been doing it for at least a decade. And what I'm using the AI for is critiquing, is little like, hey, did you notice? And also, I think that the listeners, viewers will appreciate that. You know how you can understand the Garmin metrics is with a supercomputer. That's what it actually takes.
Yeah. Okay, guys, let's talk about our first bit of news. Drop bars banned at the Leadville Trail MTB and the Little Sugar MTB races. So if you guys follow US gravel racing, you've probably seen that Lifetime just debuted that new rule. Jim Cotton wrote a great article on the Velo homepage covering the news. In it, he says that Lifetime cites rider safety and course compatibility as the reasons why. So moving forward, you basically have to use mountain bike handlebars. Logan, what do you think of this?
Yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on it. My first thought, though, is Lifetime has missed the big thing that riders were calling for when it came to rider safety, which is doing something about two-way traffic at a race that has the stakes and speed of a professional race, but the size of one of the largest participatory events on the calendar. And everybody invests a lot into it. And we're still at a point where so much of the race's energy is spent trying to navigate these scenarios of two-way traffic for a lot of elite and amateur riders. Now, the drop bar solution, if you will, was something that was initiated by riders, which Lifetime didn't really specify at all in their minimal press release that they put out. But we've since learned from Pace and McKelvin that there was some element of rider input, but still the main element of rider input was saying, we need to do something about two-way traffic. This is too important of a race to continue to use this format. And Lifetime, frankly, ignored that in favor of a policy that I think just puts all the impetus on safety on riders instead of understanding that they could have a solution in front of them to make meaningful change to rider safety. What do I think about the tech change itself? Personally, I would like to see people still have the autonomy to be creative. We saw Braden Lang set the KOM on the largest downhill of the course last year, the day before the race on a drop bar mountain bike. It's not unsafe for professional riders who are used to riding the gravel bike more than riding their mountain bike these days. So I'm for it. I could see the changes happening, but it's hard for me to see that being justified if they don't rectify the clear and present safety issue that persists to this day.
Yeah, I think one of the neat parts of the race was that mix where you had certain riders come with a mountain bike background who could feel comfortable on drop handlebars and they felt they had an advantage, and other riders who come from a drop bar background and say, like Alexei Vermeulen, I think, said, hey, I know my strengths and weaknesses, and therefore I'm going to use a flat handlebar. And that sort of melting pot together, I found really, really interesting. And I think at first glance, I would look at this and, I know the course from just watching it online and stuff, and I would say, of course, drop handlebars are faster. But Josh, you put together a bunch of data last year comparing drop handlebars to flat handlebars, and what did you find?
I found that Swenson is really fast. Is basically what it comes down to. They're not. I mean, I had to revisit this because it has been a while, but the basic thing is that Keegan raised the average speeds, but when you actually look at the riders individually, drop bars weren't really faster. So yeah, my thoughts on this are gonna bleed into sort of our next topic here, but I just wrote I just wrote an opinion piece about this that you guys haven't seen yet, but it basically says, thank God they are outlawing this because it saves us from things like the Pinarello Grevil MX. Like, you have to, it's such a stark difference from the UCI. For the UCI has this top-down thing where they don't address anything that the riders want. Their rules are just bonkers. And then you have Lifetime that comes in, and I feel that they are protecting the consumer in this instance. And according to Payson, and Keegan also commented on Payson's Instagram post about this, that this is something the riders wanted.
Yeah, I was actually quite surprised by that because outwardly, Logan, like you said, the press release doesn't really mention any of that. And it sounds to me like, well, in a way, it's like Josh, like you said, like Lifetime saving us from ourselves, sort of in a way. But on the other hand, I mean, I want people to use whatever freaking equipment they want to use and whatever they feel fastest on or most comfortable on. And I read the PR and I said to myself, oh, this sounds like a very like UCI-ish thing. Like, it sounds like the fun police are coming in here, you know? But then this morning I'm on Instagram and I did see that Instagram post from Payson. And it turns out that this was actually driven partly by the pros, like the fast people, which I was surprised by.
Some of the fast people. We need to specify here that this is not a universal opinion held by all pros. Like, I wrote a competing op-ed to Josh's. Believe it or not, we came down on different sides of this. I think as we progress through our interview or podcast, you might see why. But anecdotally, I talked to several people who are very fast professional riders who maybe are less vocal, who really kind of felt like this wasn't hitting the mark. It was, one, not conversations they were privy to, two, not hitting the actual things that they were talking about, and three, in some cases, Schwamigan was exempt from this policy, but Schwamigan is the race where there's high speeds, there's turns, there's more pack racing, where actual disconnect between two riders who have different bar systems might be more impactful. You might see more crashes from a flat bar hooking a drop, which is like where my brain goes when I think about policing these kind of things, why cyclocross doesn't allow flat bars. So it's more nuanced than just, oh, wow, this came from the riders. The riders advocated for this. Like, some riders advocated for this. We don't know exactly who they are. Obviously, we do know it's Payson, but Payson wasn't riding drop bars to begin with. He was always skeptical and it never quite worked with his fit. So we're not talking about a uniform coalition here.
Yeah.
I'm still going to stick with it's you know what, to a certain extent, I will always come down on I don't care that much about racing. And so my angle on this is really like, again, it saves us from terribly designed, because what happens is racing drives consumer interest, and we can all pretend it doesn't. We're all smarter than whatever. It doesn't matter. When people are winning on drop bar bikes, or they're winning on, I don't know, 19 mil tires or 160 cranks, or you pick whatever ridiculous thing you want to do, 35 mil tires, you know, when people are winning on that stuff, consumers start to go, well, maybe I should do that. And like, you know, maybe, and they're like, logically, you know that you're not a top pro racer, but you go, well, but it seems to be working for them. It can't hurt, right? And then you end up with things like this Pinarello, where they just went to the parts bin.
Good Lord. Should we get into this thing, the Pinarello? Speaking of right handlebars, wrong bike.
I think we should, because we could talk forever about the Leadville drop bar situation. And at the end of the day, I think the bigger question is, what does this mean for tech? Because for me, the Leadville bar situation was just an experiment to see what could trickle down the pike from like tech to the consumer. Because really, as a tech podcast, that's what it's all about.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. So if you guys went to the homepage right now, you would see a first look article from Josh about this Pinarello Grevil MX. Josh, you basically call it exactly what it is, which is a Dogma XC hardtail frame with drop handlebars and a shorty little stem on it, you know, because obviously the geometry is super compromised.
Hold on. It's not that short. They didn't even build a new handlebar. It's just their shortest. It's just their road handlebar.
I should say it's not short enough is the correct way to put it. Which is part of the challenge. But when I saw this thing, first off, I thought, good God, that's too much purple. And then I thought, somewhere in Italy or wherever around the world, there's a warehouse full of Dogma XC frames. And there was a Pinarello board meeting and somebody said, hey guys, I have an idea about all this Dogma overstock we have.
Yeah. This is my favorite thing about that. First of all, it's not a first look. It's like it's just like, this is the press release that came in. Here's what it says, kind of for some analysis. I want to be very clear. I didn't touch this thing. I would not go near it. but this is my favorite thing about the press release is that they go, they say, where is it? It's designed around in this guise, it's running Schwab Blade G1R Pro in 50 millimeter front and rear. Now, the frame is unchanged. This is the mountain bike frame. This is the hardtail mountain bike. Absolutely nothing has changed about that. And the marketing says the Grevil MX is optimized for 50 millimeter gravel tires and that it achieves an optimal blend of traction and fatigue reduction. How is it designed for mountain bike tires and 50 millimeter tires? One of those is like outright misleading, I'll say. I'll give them some benefit. It is either one or the other.
Yeah. I mean, the bike could be very fun to ride for sure. But Josh, could you tell me how it is compromised in which ways?
Oh, well,
on.
so I actually wanted to ask you guys a little bit because I was like looking at this and I'm trying to figure out, like, it's late Friday. I'm like, what is happening to this thing? And they've taken the mountain bike again, frame is unchanged, and they have put a 90 millimeter stem with a road bar on there. Does that not mean that? Now, somebody corrected me. It's not technically the geometry, but it's like the fit or like the stem is now going up, even though it's a negative stem on a road bike. And it's you're way stretched out. Like all the ones, like the Danger Home one, where he like re-engineered things. He had Daramo build an entirely new stem. I mean, it's a one piece, but an entirely new stem to make it all work. This is nothing. They just grabbed something out of the parts bin. Doesn't that like not make it work?
Perhaps.
Yeah,
That's the most precise we can be. Because there's suspension, like you do have some sag, so your bar position when you're riding it won't be the same as it just standing still. So there is like a slight adjustment to the angle of your hands, and the effective like height off the ground. But how that bar would feel in the drops perhaps could be very different to how it would feel on a gravel bike without 100 mil front suspension.
It feels like you'd be stretched out and but also sitting rather tall because it's a mountain bike, so you're long, but it's also not, the stem angle isn't right. What do you think, Mike?
I would want to look at, which I haven't done yet, I would want to look at their recommended sizing chart to see if the sizing chart is the same as the Dogma sizing chart, because I think you'd have to size down for this thing to work, possibly. I don't know any of the numbers off the top of my head. The other question I have is bottom bracket height. I'm all for all the bottom bracket being very close to the ground. That's good. But obviously it's going to be quite a bit different than what it was intended to be with the Dogma as well. So I want to try it because who knows? It could be fun. You know, different doesn't mean shit. Not all the time anyway.
Just this time.
Just this time.
I think for me, this is just clearly a mislabeled and mismarketed product. This is a great bike packing bike. And I think ultra racers will clamor at this as like a pretty neat solution for a lot of the racing demands that they have, where they need wide tires and wide clearance because of things like mud and rocks and the like. And you want 100 mil of travel for moments where you're going down a chaotic downhill in the middle of the night. Like I can see a clear use case for this, and I would love to take it for a casual bike pack. Especially around Arizona where I am, where you have to go long stretches of road to long stretches of blown out Jeep trails. So I would put some 2.25 peyotes on that thing, and I think I would have fun. But is it a gravel race bike? Is it a gravel anything? No, it's not. It is something that is actually more suited towards long haul bike packing, in my opinion.
So I am super happy that you brought up that use case, because I love that Trek made the Check Out, which is, to my what I can see, is basically like designed exactly for that, but done the right way. Like they've re-engineered the whole system. They have created a full suspension gravel bike that takes big tires. I don't know, 2.2 maybe. I don't remember exactly, but and I think it's offering a real solution, and it's not a part spin monstrosity.
Yeah, exactly. And it doesn't have a beautiful paint job, but it's certainly less purple. That helps.
The checkout is just a unique bike too. Like you really have to give it to Trek for trying something different. Whereas Pinarello is doing something that we see other companies do, whether officially or unofficially. Like Lale Wilcox has done something similar with Specialized. Pivot released a very similar bike that I know certain people raced at, like Unbound, like Chris Mellman, who did Unbound XL, raced the less in a drop bar configuration. His had a rigid fork, which I think makes more sense, frankly. But there is this genre of bike that's coming up. I just feel like with Pinarello's mountain bike already kind of in a strange place, it just doubles down on that strangeness as like oddity in the market. Whereas Trek feels more unique, and this feels something that's more haphazard.
Yeah, that's putting it kind. The Trek is an actual engineered solution to a problem, and the Pinarello is parts bin. What can we get rid of, and maybe someone will buy. Also, I imagine Pidcock needs it for something, but I don't know.
Safe to say that Pinarello's not going to send us one to review probably at this point, which I think we're all okay with.
That's fine. I don't want that thing. Also, I did, for what it's worth, while we were talking, look up their sizing charts, and they don't have sizing charts. They have a good luck. There's 4 sizes.
Okay. And there's no
Small,
recommended...
medium.
Like,
No,
I wanted to know if the recommended sizing was the same on the Dogma as the Grevil MX.
Yeah,
so they
I'm
don't
not
give you like
any...
a height or inseam or anything?
I don't see that.
I mean, that definitely
maybe I'm missing
points
it,
towards
but I
it
don't
being,
think so.
That definitely points towards things being haphazard, I would say.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, guys, speaking of suspension on the front of things, let's talk about that.
Wait, before we start this, I just want to say, you guys both have missed one very important suspension fork in this conversation that we're about to have. And I think it maybe is the best one, which is the lefty. The lefty, I think it's the Ocho, right? Is it? No, I'm just making that up.
No,
the lefty gravel one.
I do have a ton of experience on different lefties over the years. Nothing recent. Nothing within the last like 4-ish years. I mean, I'm a giant lefty fan personally.
So the gravel one is different though, by the way.
Yeah.
Just an actual different thing. But I love it because it's closer to a road bike.
Yeah. And I think that's a valid opinion. And that's where the Cane Creek comes in as well too. So let's dig into these things. Logan, you've spent many months now, I think, testing Cane Creek Invert, RockShox Rudy, and the Fox Tapercast 32. So before we get into the details of the forks, I kind of want to know, how did you test these things? Were they all on the same bike? What bike was it? Where did you ride it? All that stuff.
Yeah, so I have been testing mostly here in Arizona. So that was including the bad times of the summer. So I've put it through a lot of different temperatures, but that's not quite as important for suspension because the seals are good under heat. I would be more curious about Mike, your experience in the wet, because I feel like you put those seals through a little bit more of the ringer than I did. But my testing kind of all started the same, where I'd focus on getting it on the bike, reading it, doing the setup, trying to tinker with the setup, trying to make sure I understood the technology from sort of an out of the box and installation perspective. And then I always do the same first ride. So here in Arizona, in Phoenix, there's like an abandoned dam system, which is technically private property, but like no one goes out there, nothing happens. It's abandoned. So in that area, there's tons of gravel roads crisscrossing this old abandoned dam zone and the ridges around it. And it connects with a little bit of single track. So I have what I call the test track, which is a 15-kilometer loop that encompasses every type of gravel I could find in that area to put it through different scenarios, whether that's off camber, whether that's ruts, whether that's sand, rocks, smooth gravel, and light single track. I have it all in this condensed 15-kilometer loop that takes me anywhere from 30 to 40 minutes, depending on how fast I'm going in the wind direction and all this stuff. So that's the first ride. It's like, go to the test track, ride it on roads out there, do a couple laps, ride it home. Write down your thoughts. And then I did that with each bike, with each fork, and I do it with every bike or every wheel set or every tire I use. It's like my standard procedure to get acquainted with it. And then after that, I try to incorporate it into regular gravel riding, which for me is actually pretty binary. So it's a lot of road to light trails because Phoenix is a large city. There's not a lot of gravel roads, but we do have extensive trail networks that are not very rocky. There are the rocky ones. That's where I take my 4-stroke BMC mountain bike, full 120, big terrain. But it's either big terrain or very gravel bikeable terrain. There's not a lot of in between. There's not a lot of stuff that I would take a hardtail to, or that Pinarello monstrosity if we're talking keeping on brand. So I really try to keep it consistent to the riding characteristics. Do some bigger adventures out to more conventionally gravel terrain. BWR Arizona is here in town, so I can take it on actual race courses that gravel cyclists will use. BWR Arizona is one of the more popular gravel races in terms of participation, especially among pros. So it feels like a very good place to put these things through their paces, and just live with it. Live with it for a couple weeks, live with it for a couple months. I was able to take it to Boise, Idaho, and one other state, Utah. So I have gotten out of the state of Arizona, but most of it has been in this context. I finished my sort of chunked reporting in November. And since then, I've been kind of just going with my heart. After I wrote all of my things down, I've been sort of trying to go with what I want. And that has actually been pretty informative. So my opinions maybe has morphed after the fact too. So nuts and bolts, the bike I've been using is a Rodeo Labs Trail Donkey 4.0. So it is a bike with high clearance. So I can clear 2.25 in the front and the rear, even without suspension forks. It is a bike that has an adjustable rear wheelbase. So there's a slider system. So I can change the wheelbase, which I actually found wasn't the same as suspension correcting, but did offset some of the feeling. If you move the slider back, it actually elongates the bike and sort of matches the slackness that you might get from a suspension fork. So I was able to play around with it a little bit, but it wasn't suspension corrected. So I definitely felt the 40 mil travel of the Fox and had to adjust accordingly. But it was a good basis because I could go all the way up to 2.25 with tires when the fork suited it, and all the way down to a 40 mil tire to kind of understand the characteristics of that by pushing the rear wheel forward and figuring out the differences in feel from that rear position. So it was a good format for it. Yeah, and I've learned a ton. It's been a pretty eye-opening experience coming into this, thinking gravel forks are one thing and realizing there's so much diversity and nuance to this product that we have a lot to talk about today, frankly.
Yeah. You hit on a bunch of things. Again, we are going to get into how these things perform, but I have some questions first. First off, you mentioned tire widths. One of the things that I've thought of is running a suspension fork can mean maybe you can use a narrower, lighter tire, therefore possibly more aero. You coming from a roadie background originally, do you care? I hear a lot of the holdup being about aero concerns. Is that something that is on your mind when you use these forks?
No, frankly. There's a lot of other aero concerns that I try to prioritize before that point. So I'm just not at the, it's just not in my consideration to consider aero when it comes to suspension forks. I think my assumption is if you're doing this, you already have a little bit of a different or more flexible view of what aerodynamics could be on the frame. So I'm not viewing this purely as a racer. So I'm not viewing this purely from a point of aerodynamics. If I was, I would say just leave the suspension forks behind. I don't think you're gaining anything from a narrower tire by introducing the apparatus of suspension, with the exception of the loft fork that we didn't even test. So
Yeah.
that's where I think aerodynamics fit into it, where it's like, if you're considering this, like, kind of put those thoughts aside. I do think the tire question and tire size actually presents itself in a different way, where I tried and I liked running a smaller tire in the front and a bigger tire in the rear. Now, this is something I talked to other riders and professionals about, and they also did this to, one, level off the bike, because you're adding height on the front with suspension. So a way to offset height is to decrease the volume of the tire. Second, in theory, suspension losses are offset by the suspension, rather than trying to achieve all of your suspension loss management, which is the whole reason why people are running mountain bike tires on gravel bikes, because the tire does that work. As someone who is a proponent of big tires, I tried it and I still kind of wanted the big tires and the suspension. It was kind of like but yeah, I think this is more of a yes and rather than an either or. Um,
Okay.
because the riding where I would want a suspension fork is the riding where I'd want a bigger tire. They go hand in
Yeah.
hand. And at the
Yeah.
end of the
Exactly.
day, the criticism is that these are old school mountain bikes, or like 90s hardtails. And I think, yes, that is a fair assessment. And that's also not a bad thing.
Yeah. Exactly. You also touched on geometry, uh, especially on bikes that aren't designed around the suspension fork. I might make the argument that for a lot of people, a bike with a slightly longer wheelbase and taller handlebars, whether you like it or not, is good for you.
Mhm. Absolutely. People, I think, really over scrutinize the rear chainstay length. And this is me going down a big rabbit hole that I have talked about with a lot of people. I really think people completely fixate on the wrong thing when they think about having a really small wheelbase. Because I've tried a lot of wheelbase combinations. I can move that slider all around. And guess what? You're not adding an incredible amount of power transfer or maneuverability if you're just messing around with the back. It is so much more about what's happening in the front of your bike and your body positioning that can dictate what that feels like. So I think that's a bit of a red herring, and I appreciate that suspension has gone about dealing with this nuance that comes with manipulating the front of the bike rather than just focusing on the rear.
So Mike and I have talked about this a bunch in different ways, but I'm gonna try to synthesize some of that here, which is to say that actually I'm gonna sidestep it a little bit and say it's not so much that I care about the short rear end or this or that, or I think it really comes down to what sort of riding are you doing. And this is obvious, but there's very few things that I can imagine I want to do less than careen down a mountain with stuff flying at my face. What I like about riding a bike is pushing on the pedals. And so I really prefer roads that are just unpaved. And in that setting, I want a road bike with big tires, basically. And that's why I'm just like, we could get into these discussions about where we go, oh, I want a 410 chainstay, or 420 is too slow, or whatever, all these ridiculous things. But it just doesn't matter. It's about the bike as a system. And I basically want a road bike that has big tires.
If you want a
Yeah.
road bike with big tires, don't get a suspension fork. I'll say that right now. Like, you are limiting your gravel bike's ability to be an all-road machine. And I, as someone who for a couple of years only had a gravel bike, that was the only bike I owned. I just swapped wheel sets and I was very happy and I was doing a lot of road stuff. I, at that moment in my life, would have hated having a suspension fork on. It completely takes the bike away from being a passable road bike, in my opinion. And I think gravel bikes oftentimes are passable road bikes, a lot farther towards the speed side of the equation than people want them to be. Like, they are, like, some gravel bikes are very capable road bikes. As soon as you put a suspension fork on it, you're losing that.
Yeah. One thing that I want to say that I was surprised about when I first started using a suspension fork on my gravel bike is how much it helped my climbing. And my question for you, Logan, is Arizona, you got a lot of steppy, like chunky climbs, with ledges in them. Like they might be an inch, they might be 3 inches, whatever, with a lot of loose gravel and things like that. I found where I live, a suspension fork actually lets me climb faster on I mean, not super smooth gravel roads, but like a normal rough gravel road, you just carry more momentum up the climb and you don't have to work as hard.
It
What's your
definitely
take?
took me it was a process to get there, frankly. At first I was like, I am bobbing way too much. This is not what I want. This is not helping me. Like if I was seated climbing, it would be great, but like, I don't know, I do like a little punch to get over some of the steeper bits. And I remember I did one race, the Chino gravel grinder, which is in central Arizona. And there was a moment where the guys just went and I was bobbing my way. I was like, what's happening? And I didn't get the air right. Like I kind of used their baseline and it was too soft.
Yeah.
And I think it was colder that morning. So maybe because when you have a smaller suspension system, it's, I think, a little more sensitive to things like temperature. So I didn't dial it in right. But more recently, I think I did dial it in right. I just ran it harder and I did a very long ride with these long extended 40-minute climbs with a lot of different variant percentages. And I climbed better than I've climbed those roads at any point. So I do think there is upside to it, especially with the Cane Creek, because it's incredibly light. We're talking about like a 300 to 400 gram delta between a rigid fork and this suspension fork. So that's not a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. So that fork I've really appreciated as a gravel climbing fork. And I think it's definitely something I want to keep in rotation because it does feel like once you dial in what that pressure is for you, there's so much upside.
Yeah. Let's dig into the Cane Creek fork here first. I have one in front of me. It is very pressure sensitive, I found. We should talk about, I mean, maybe the specs first before we dig into how it works. So lightest by far, you pretty much nailed it right there. No lockout on the shorter travel one. 835 grams. Dude,
Yes.
very light. The big
Josh
thing
probably
here,
thinks that is too heavy, but Josh can keep
Josh
that
is
to
like,
himself.
that's 3 rigid forks.
Something like that.
Yeah.
I mean, I understand that it just doesn't matter. Like, whatever.
Yeah.
It just doesn't
So-
matter. But
The Cane Creek carbon upper, there's aluminum tubes in here. It's bonded together. It's obviously inverted. The whole idea there from Cane Creek, they're trying to make it look more like a normal fork. You know, like if you come from a roadie background and you see a fork with an arch on it, like a normal right side up fork, it definitely doesn't have like the sleekness that this does. The other big thing we should say, there's no damper in this thing. It's just an air spring, which is I found most interesting. And I think for me that I was most hesitant about that. The big upside I found, Logan, tell me what you think about this, but because it has no damper, there's way fewer seals in there. This thing on small bumps, trail chatter, like little washboards over the road, way more active than the other forks. What did you
It's
think?
insane. I mean, the small bump control is unlike anything I've ridden. It's honestly like, it's made me think so deeply about my mountain bike and how insufficient my front suspension is because it is so active and it is so nuanced. The one thing I want to point out you did mention is the stanchions move independently too. And while that's not going to be happening all the time, like it has the ability to like handle off camber differently and handle everything you throw at it with the right precise movements up until a certain point. There's a certain size of object, and I'm sure we'll talk about this, where that nimbleness backfires. But the small bump control, washboards, anything that I would say is below like a 4-inch impact, it absorbs like a champ. It's unlike any of the other forks I've tested. It is unlike anything I've ridden, really. It's quite active. It's quite nice.
Yeah. We should also mention too that Cane Creek says outright, like, this is not meant to do the same thing that the 32 taper cast is. They're very different forks. And I need to preface what I'm going to say next here. So I live in Squamish. It's very rough. It's very chunky. I don't like riding mountain bike trails on my gravel bike. It feels super lame, to be honest. Like, I'm not a fan of that. I know how good a mountain bike is on those trails. So I do most of my riding on gravel roads and double tracks and things like that. And like we said, the no damper makes the thing super active on the small stuff. But where the fork feels like it gets a bit confused is extended rough sections where it's going in and out of deep into its travel many times. You know, like picture like a 600-foot long downhill section, and this road hasn't seen a car in 20 years, but it's seen nothing but water damage. So it's just rough and chunky, and the fork is not made for this. But that is where things can start to feel a bit sketchy because you have an undamped spring and no bottom out bumper. So I don't know, did you experience that at all?
Oh boy, did I. The whack that this fork makes when you hit the bottom makes you feel like you just broke your frame. And I got over that. But
Ka-ching!
it really sort of came back to, I did a point-to-point gravel ride in Arizona with a bunch of people who were on mountain bikes. And everyone told me it was a mountain bike route, but I've done it and I knew it wasn't. So I was like, okay, this is a great place to test the limits of the Cane Creek because I just know I'm going to be descending with people on mountain bikes and I'm going to find the limit of it. And the amount of whacks I got and the looks I got every time I whacked it, people would be like, do you just break your bike? I'm like, no, I'm used to it now. But it's like, it was exactly what you described, like 1,000-foot net drop on really rough, rocky clay, sort of bottomed out terrain where I would just get to a certain point where I would just need to go a lot slower and be like, all right, here it is. I've bottomed out 4 times in the last 10 seconds.
Yes.
I'm not feeling like I have I'm stable at this point. I need to let it go. And then I smoked everybody on the climbs because I was just like, at that point, probably 5, 6, 7 pounds lighter in terms of my bike system. So it was great. But like the downhills, I was making these whacks constantly on stuff that I wouldn't always expect to do it, especially after a couple of those. It felt like, once it gets going, it's going to be sort of like, okay, Jesus, take the wheel. I'm out of control, which is not awesome for like not trails. I wasn't riding on trails. If I had the Fox, it would have been great. I would have kept up with the mountain bikes. I'm sure of it.
Yeah. My answer was to overpressurize the fork by about 20%.
Yeah. And I think even that was with 10% overpressurizing on my end. And I was still bottoming out to a distracting a degree.
It seems odd to me that there's not just a bump stop at the bottom of it. What's the deal there?
I asked Cane Creek about this, and basically, just like we said before, this fork is not made to be, smashing down super chunky, ledgy stuff. Josh, I would say this fork is made for a rider like yourself. Like, you got to do a bunch of pavement miles to get to your gravel, and when you get to your gravel, it's not like absolutely destroyed roads full of boulders. It's fastish, smoothish gravel road. It's off-road for sure, but it's not really, really rough. And so I would say, Josh, this is the ideal fork for you. But my caveat there is they do one with a lockout, but the SL doesn't have a lockout. And the fork is so active that I kind of wish both of them had a lockout because you would want to use it. I might not, again, because the fork is overpressurized for me and how I want to ride it, but you're going to ride it more closer to the recommended air pressure. And I would think that you'd want to lock this thing out.
Yeah, it seems like there's some stuff missing in this. Like,
That's why it's so light, my man.
That is the point.
I feel like they've given up too much. It should have a lockout. It should have a bump stop, and then it should still be light and all of the things. The active suspension is great. Like, I agree with you on this is where I do think that there is a spot for suspension in my riding. Is that sort of like, just take out the small bumps because you can be faster, which is what Specialized says about their Diverge. But there sounds like a lot of compromises in that thing.
Yeah. One of the plus sides to this too is, just to balance things out again, is I rebuilt this in a hotel room with a 4mm Allen key and like a 3D printed wrench to get the fork seal out. Like, I can literally take this apart in like a minute and a half, which you can't do with some of the other forks. I mean, yeah, it's not difficult to drop lowers on any forks, but service intervals and things like that, this is just super, super easy to deal with that way, which is a plus. So, Logan, give us your final takeaway on this thing. Who's it for?
I think it's anywhere. It's from a beginner cyclist would love this fork. if you're getting into gravel, if you're coming from the road, if you want to have a bike that like you can tackle a lot of different adventures, like this raises the floor, I think, of a lot of people's riding ability in a really great way. And it's an expensive piece, so it's like it's hard to say that that's exactly for beginners. But like, if you know you like road cycling and you want to do gravel and you want to have a gravel bike that's for gravel, it's great. It's also good for racers. I plan on riding this fork at Mid-South. Mid-South is a very conventional gravel race with a lot of gravel roads, and I'm thrilled about it because I think it's going to be really nice to have that consistent active travel, small bump control, and it is going to be relatively more aerodynamic than the other forks, which I think for racing, I will appreciate. It doesn't have a lot of clearance, so I am going to be having to size down from what I would probably do without it, but there are a lot of great 50 mil tires that are populating the market, which weren't there last year. So I think the moment is now for these kinds of forks to exist. And I think we're going to see some changes from Cane Creek for their next iteration that will probably add a little bit of weight, but I think we'll try to manage like that bottoming out a little bit more, because I do think that's kind of the issue. I didn't really feel like I was missing a lockout, but I wasn't trying to ride a lot of road with it. And I'm not someone who actually, even when they ride road, typically like I'll lock out my rear suspension on my mountain bike, but I'll keep my front suspension open because it's okay. I don't feel a lot of loss from that, but that's just me. You might also feel like you're missing that lockout if you do end up riding a lot of road with it.
I actually don't tend to lock out suspension that often on the road either. I kind of like that little bob. It gives you a little rhythm when you climb.
Yeah. I thought I would be locking out my suspension fork all the time when I first put one on a gravel bike. It turns out I literally never do. And I ride, I take the same bike on 200-kilometer off-road days that I do on 150-kilometer all pavement days. Same bike, same tires, same air pressure. Like, fuck it, whatever. Let's hit it. Josh, I'm going to mail you this Cane Creek fork.
I would like to see that.
I have a bunch of forks. I'm looking at them right now. I have the RockShox. I have the Fox around somewhere. Yeah, they're on a shelf.
Yeah. Okay, let's talk about a fork that's at the exact opposite end of the gravel bike suspension range. Logan, tell me about the RockShox Rudy.
Yeah, the RockShox Rudy. First off, it's a striking piece of equipment. You could call it over-engineered. It's definitely the heaviest, but I took that out of the box and I was like, this is a beautiful piece of equipment. And now not everyone's going to have that relationship with gear, but I sure did. I really appreciated the look and the feel of intentionality around the engineering. It is a do-it-all fork. That's kind of the way I put it in this category. It's the one that covers the most types of riding. It has a lockout. It has a conventional shape and construction, but that means it's really easy to set up. It doesn't have the same nuances that the Cane Creek had. It comes in a lot of different configurations. It's 30, 40, and now 60. So you can run a lot of different configurations with that. It also has different offsets, which we're not talking about because offsets, I feel like, gets into different territory. But if you run a smaller frame, you can run a 50 mil offset, which is a lot better suited for that type of geometry relative to the 45-degree offset that I think the other two forks come standard with, although the Fox might have a 50 mil option. So it's infinitely customizable. It is the heaviest, but it is really engineered in a great way. It's easy to use. It's easy to live with. It's easy to dial in the right pressure. It is kind of, if you were to get one gravel fork, what I'll say is I think this is the one you should get if you want to do as many different things as possible.
Yeah. My takeaway with the Rudy, I used it this was a couple years ago now, to be honest, but my takeaway was I put it on my bike and I never looked at it again. It never made any crazy noises. I was close to recommended air pressures. It's obviously way heavier than the Cane Creek, but it is quite a bit stiffer torsionally. And again, on gravel roads. I'm not sure how important that is, but it definitely feels like a more substantial fork. And the travel is, I mean, it's a lot more refined. It has a damper that works. It has an effective lockout that's on and off. Although I did find the lockout lever hurt my sensitive, soft little finger. It has a bit of a sharp edge on it that I didn't like.
Is that your finger made of sugar also?
Yes.
The lockout was interesting because I don't know, it did feel, you could feel which way it was going. Like there was more tension when you were locking it out, like in a pronounced way where it's like I didn't even have to think about it. It's like I could feel if I was locking it out or unlocking it, which is just a good mental thing if you're trying to do it in a quick moment. I will say I had the 30 mil travel and it felt like just sitting level. It ate a lot of the travel with my body weight. So I wasn't feeling like I was getting a ton of suspension.
Mhm.
And with that weight, I would kind of look at it and be like, all of this weight and all of this machinery for just what feels like 15 to 20 mil of travel feels like a lot. But at the end of the day, like it is significant. 15, 20 mil can be a lot in gravel riding. And it was something where I could kind of set it, forget it. I also actually forgot to mention, I used this fork when I went to Richmond to write a story on the 10-year anniversary of the World Championships there. And I was mostly riding road. I did some local trails. It was great for cobblestones. And I think cobblestones is a good benchmark for small bump control. So I think it does a pretty good job with small bumps. It's pretty active. It's not quite as much as the Cane Creek, but it doesn't struggle. All of these forks are pretty good at mitigating those kind of scenarios. So just a great all-around fork.
It also has a very tall bottom out bumper, and I think it rides on that bumper fairly often. But there was not a single clang from that thing. No
Yes.
matter what dumbass thing I was doing. It never felt like a hard bottom. Even we're going to talk about the Fox fork next. I can get that one to make a big bang sometimes.
Yeah,
nothing like the Cane Creek, but yeah, the Rudy just felt like solid.
It's solid. It's solid, and you can take it wherever. If I was to just have one bike with one fork, it's an easy choice. The interesting thing is if I was to have two forks, and so I have three forks, and if I was to get rid of one, the one I would get rid of quickest would also be the Rudy, because I do think the Fox and the Cane Creek do their strengths better than the Fox or than the RockShox, which is an interesting thing, and I think really underscores how nuanced this product landscape is when one fork is the best if you only can choose one, but the other two forks are best if you choose two. So, yeah, I want to give it its flowers, but I also say like there are things that are limiting about it. Like it doesn't quite have the same amount of travel and engagement as the Cane Creek in terms of its activeness. It doesn't quite have the same features and broad use case as the Fox, which has just much greater clearance. But it does offer this happy medium that I think a lot of people would enjoy.
Yeah, that makes it the great only fork option. Let's talk about the Fox. Give me the specs about the 32 taper cast.
So 32K taper cast comes in 40 and 50 millimeters. So there's no 30 millimeter option. This is something very important for people to consider if you don't have a suspension corrected bike, because this is the only fork I needed to change my saddle position. And now this is something people don't always do, and they might start riding a suspension fork and have injuries. I've heard this happen because not only do you have to change the tilt, but sometimes you actually have to change the forward and aft position, because when you tilt a bike forward, you're increasing your, or what is the angles here? I'm trying to do geometry in my head, but basically your seat is farther back behind the bottom bracket. So you need to push it forward too. So it's an adjustment. And 10 millimeters matters in terms of these things, because a little bit of difference to your seat tube angle will dramatically affect your position over the bottom bracket and will dramatically affect how you feel pedaling the bike. So that was the big change. It comes in black and orange. And the big thing with also, it has a lockout. Shouldn't neglect that, even though that will be a subject of our discussion, because that lockout is not very effective. Speaking of lockouts, I kind of wish just didn't bother with. And what am I missing?
Lots of damper adjustments on
Lots
this
of
thing. You
damper
could adjust
adjustments. Yes.
low speed adjustment. You got external low speed rebound, which a Cane Creek doesn't have, but the RockShox does have, of course.
Yes.
And that lets you, set it up how you want it. And I think there's an argument to be made for, well, it doesn't have much travel. You're setting it up pretty stiff. Like you can't really feel the differences too much, when you're running it very firm. But on the other hand, I've always made the argument that the less suspension you have, the more dialed in it has to be. I also like knobs. I also like
Yeah.
turning dials.
It's the most adjustable. It is, undoubtedly.
I love
How did
that
it
you
work
just
for you?
admit that.
Yeah, no, I do. Logan, on the trail, how did it work?
It was great.
Or the
I mean,
road, I should
this
say.
one was perhaps my favorite in terms of what it did for my riding, which is a good gut check sometimes because I'm a chronic underbiker. I like to just be like, what's over there? I want to go over there. And this fork unlocked that. One, I loved the big tires and I could run the big tires and have the fork. My number one setup with this fork was the Peyote 2.25. I did run it with 50 mil tires. I actually ran all three forks with the same specialized Terra tire, 50 mil, kind of moderate tread, felt like a good meeting point. But I like this one with the Peyotes the most because one, the Peyote 2.25 is my favorite gravel tire if I had to pick one. And it just unlocked massive amounts of terrain, whether that was urban trails. I could do a little bit of the kind of nastier stuff, a little more of the rockier stuff. I did this big loop that we call Sheep Ridge, which is an 80-mile loop where you have 40 miles that is basically inaccessible by car and is almost always done on a mountain bike. I was like, I want to do this on a drop bar bike. And it was great. And it felt like I would do it again. It didn't feel like I was on the wrong bike at all. And it felt like I even had some advantages where my gravel bike has more storage capacity. I could run a frame bag. It's lighter on the climbs. And that was just like the perfect adventure fork. It just turned this bike into something that felt more like a hardtail, which for me and my ride characteristics, just I enjoy. It just unlocked it in a way that the other ones didn't, which I appreciated.
It felt like a tiny mountain bike fork to me. It
Yep.
feels like a tiny mountain bike fork to me. I have it on the front of a Allied Able right now with a 2.25 Race King. And there's not a ton of clearance, but it feels like a tiny mountain bike fork. I also should say I have on this exact fork definitely over 25,000 kilometers on it. And I've only dropped the lowers like twice maybe. And she's trucking along just fine. No issues. It's all good. Everybody that's listening, definitely don't do that. Service your shit. Logan, tell me about the lockout on this fork.
The lockout is just not effective. You twist it and you think it's going to feel different, and it feels about maybe 20% stiffer. It is very aggressively not there, and I found that to be frustrating because I know it's adding weight, it's adding complexity, and you're just not getting what you want out of it, which is disappointing. And I think something we should point out because, yes, I think it is difficult to create an effective lockout when you're only dealing with 40 millimeters of travel, but it should be more effective than that. And if it's not going to be more effective than that, I just feel like just lean into the fact that it's going to be a little bit leaner and maybe have a little less functionality, but it just felt underdeveloped and underbaked and not as effective as you want it to be.
If the lever is there and it says it has a lockout function, it should lock the damn fork out. Am I right?
Yeah.
I don't know.
And I think, I'm sure if we gave some Fox engineers some truth serum, they'd be like, yeah, we kind of maybe want that back. We might take it a different way now that we've seen the Cane Creek. But it is the big downside of the fork. But if that's the big nitpick, I think we're looking at something that's a pretty good product. It was set up pretty easily. I do have some understanding of suspension, and if you don't, a lot of these things might feel unfamiliar and you might not set it up perfectly right away, but I did appreciate the ability to dial in more things. And I have really enjoyed living with it. Haven't needed to service it either, although I'm probably getting up towards around that same point where I'll need to put some work in it. But it is my favorite fork, frankly.
Those sticky seals is just a pedaling platform, my man. It's for efficiency.
Yeah.
One thing
That's
I
your
will
lockout.
say that, yeah, exactly, right? One thing that I do find kind of annoying with the Fox fork, this is really nitpicking. You know how the back of the legs, in the taper cast forks, they have that like webbed open section, and same with the arch as well. The front of the arch is like webbed. It's just constantly full of mud. Which
that's more of a you problem than a me problem, but I can
Yeah.
understand how that would be annoying.
Yeah, exactly.
But it looks cool.
Yeah, it does look pretty neat. I'm gonna make 3D printed little covers that go over it, so that doesn't get all packed with mud.
That's
Logan,
clever.
who do you think that this fork best suits?
This fork suits the bike packers, for sure. This fork suits those who like to underbike. If you like to push the limits of what gravel biking is, it's for you. It's for those who have suspension corrected bikes. I think if you don't have a suspension corrected bike, you're going to have to adjust your riding style a little bit. It might feel a little pitchy. But not a deal. I don't have a suspension corrected bike, and I had a pretty good time on it, and you can work around it. But this is really for those adventurers, those who want their gravel bike to go a little further.
Yeah. You touched on something interesting before I want you to expand on. You said if you could have one fork, it would be the RockShox. It's very middle of the road.
Mm-hmm.
But if you could have two forks, it would be the Fox and the Cane Creek. Can you just explain that?
Yeah. I mean, we're talking about, this is a deeper issue, actually. This goes into like my philosophy about gravel, but gravel right now is undefined in the cycling space because for some people it's very specific. It means gravel roads. It means you're going on a dirt road, there's some small gravel, but as soon as you get to trail or double track, that's like the realm of mountain biking. And then there's other people that view gravel as anything that's not clearly road or clearly mountain biking. And it could be a 70% paved road with 30% trail. It could be any number of things. And it's all depending on like, what do you define gravel as? So for me, if I'm doing a gravel specific ride or going towards that specific side of the spectrum, let's call it Mid-South, because that's, I think, a great way to kind of put that image in people's heads. The Cane Creek is the best. But if I'm doing something that I view as gravel, that's like rule of three. So a great race in Arkansas that is in theory 30% paved, 30% single track, 30% gravel. I'm using the Fox every time because it's just better suited for that type of variance and especially the gnarlier end of the spectrum. So that's kind of how I look at this divide. And the RockShox does the best at straddling both of those definitions. If you're someone who likes gravel as a mixed bag, it's going to be fine. If you like gravel in the most specific definition of it, it's going to be fine. But that's really, I think, what you need to ask yourself before you get into the idea of like, which one do I purchase? Because thankfully, they're all really great products. They're all things that we can point to, all of these good things and a couple of nitpicks, which is what you want out of expensive aftermarket products that you will add to your bike after you buy it. But it is not the same. You're not getting the same product. You're not getting the same upside, and you need to know what upside you want if you're going to invest the money.
Yeah, exactly. Josh, have we made you a bit more gravel suspension curious?
No, I've ridden a lot of gravel suspension. I really have, I had a Slate, a Cannondale Slate. I had a, Topstone Lefty.
With the Lefty?
Yeah.
Can you tell me a bit
Lefty.
about the Lefty? What did you think of that thing? Because that's a fork that we obviously haven't talked about.
Yeah, I mean, I love it. It feels so. Those bikes, the Slate especially, and then they shifted a little bit when they went to the first like setup on the Topstone, and then the more recent Topstone is even a little farther from this. But they were, when the Slate came out, that was 2016, and everyone at the time was like, "What is this thing? It's like we don't know what it is."
Classic Cannondale.
It had 650B wheels too. It was like 650B wheels with like 42 millimeter tires, so it had like effectively really little wheels.
Yeah. Well, because they didn't have the parts, the like all the gravel parts weren't there. So like they couldn't pull stuff off from the group sets, and chain lines were weird and fitting everything in the space. But the result was like what they built was a road bike that had suspension and big tires. And I loved it. I absolutely loved it. But you know, and then so I've ridden a lot on it, and like I said, I very rarely locked it out. You just go with the bob and it's fine. More recently, I reviewed the Specialized, which we can argue about whether that's suspension or not, but I think from a rider perspective, it is attempting to address the same issue. So and yeah, it's great. And I think if I'm doing a race, if I'm doing a gravel race where I'm going to be out all day, to me, it's that a gravel race would be at least 100 miles, ideally longer, although a lot of them don't offer that. But, you know, so if I'm doing that and I'm going to be out on gravel all day, yeah, suspension's fantastic. But as I've gotten older and been more like, I don't have to do things I don't like.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what I really don't like to do is ride like underbike. I don't want to do that. I want to just like ride fast and be on either gravel roads or paved roads.
Josh, is there a world where you would use a redshift suspension stem?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
Have you seen
So,
those things?
I've never used one.
They're so ugly.
But they seem like they make a lot of sense. Like you're talking about the Specialized with the
Yeah, I'm kind of kidding. I'm kind of kidding.
Okay. Okay.
They're atrocious looking.
So I feel like this is interesting because I've ridden the redshift and I don't like it. I really don't like it for one particular reason. It pitches your hands forward and down. Like
Ooh.
your hands are
yeah.
rolling a little
Good
bit.
point.
And for some people that's fine, but for me that felt like a disconnect in the kinetic chain to my handling, where it's like, okay, suddenly something is subtly different in a place where I don't want it to be. My arms are doing something different. I'm really particular about what my arms are doing because that is the foundations of technical riding skill. So I have always balked at that. I know people really like it. My dad's bike actually has it on right over here. So it's there for people, but it's not for me. The Diverge, the whole stem and handlebars move together, which is different. And I hesitate to call it suspension because the amount of suspended mass is so much. Like you're just not going to have the same responsiveness. It has not the same small bump control at all. It's more of a damper. I think it's damping. It's not suspending.
It's not giving you more traction. It's giving you more
yeah.
comfort, but it's not giving you more traction.
So
That's why
that's
I
the key
would
distinction
argue.
between damping and suspension in my eyes. That being said, I loved the Diverge. It's a great bike, and it really, I think, pushes things towards a future orientation in a great way with having longer wheelbases, bigger tires, just a platform that's better suited for what, Josh, you're looking to do, honestly. But we're talking about a little bit of different thing. I will say a big thing that we're not talking about in terms of suspension is the cost of switching. So one, you have to redo all of your cabling. You have to route your cables to your brakes a different way. And you can't switch back unless you completely redo your front brake. And that is incredibly annoying unless you have like a brake line coupler. And I want to get to a point where we're better with couplers, where that is an easier choice. And you can do that without having a different caliper. Because right now we're in an in-between place. And I think we're not quite at the point with suspension forks where it can be something you swap in and out as quickly as I'd want it to be. Because right now it feels like a commitment that you're making that you have to stick with.
Dude, no gravel rider who puts a suspension fork on their bike is going to take it off. Everybody that's sitting on the fence right now, no, you wouldn't. It's better. It's better everywhere.
I would. So this is where I line up with Josh.
You have,
this is
you
where
have
we're
3 forks though.
Yeah, true.
In the normal world, a gravel rider
Mike on this.
goes out and buys one suspension fork. You know, they put it on their bike. They realize that it's better for them because they're more comfortable and they're more confident. They have more control. They're going faster. It's better in every freaking metric, and they're never taking it off their bike. That's my take.
This is
I don't
where
even
I think
like
we
to
disagree.
change wheels. I don't even want to change wheels before. I just don't care. It's fine. I could care less.
I like tinkering. I like having. I love tinkering. I think I've rode. I just the amount of combinations I've ridden over the last year is truly insane. And I've spent way too much time working on my bike. But
You don't
I
live in the
don't
real
think I'm
world, my man.
alone. I don't think I'm alone. I think there are people who would love the ability to go rigid and the ability to go suspended, and that right now is not even really an option, frankly.
Why can't you just zip tie your brake line to the backside of your dumb rigid forks
Oh,
and just be
man.
done with it?
Oh
Just
man,
admit,
I
who
mean
cares?
the aesthetics.
You could do that. But I
Yeah.
just look, this is part of getting older also, is like, yeah, tinkering's fun and all, but you know what? It's more fun riding my bike. I'd rather just like take that time that I would be tinkering with the bike and go pedal. And I
Yeah.
just don't care if I'm slightly not optimized in some situation. It's whatever. That's why I like the Envy Mog with the zip wheels and the Explorer setup, because I don't care what I'm doing. I can take that bike and do a fairly fast group ride and be fine. And I can also do like bonkers things where I'm underbiking. It's all good.
I think we have to acknowledge, Logan, that all three of us don't live in the real world. Like, people don't have 3 suspension forks, and most people don't have the desire to be dealing with frickin' brake lines, like undoing brake lines and reattaching them and like all that shit. And it's awesome that you're curious. I'm also curious. You know, it's fun to tinker and do all the things, but oh man, no one who's not a pro is taking the suspension fork off their bike. They're committed.
I want to, you know, I'm young, I'm Gen Z. I dream bigger. We could do it.
TikToker.
It could be a 15-minute change. If the couplers were there, it could be a 15-minute change. It's not right now. Right now, it's an hour minimum if you're skilled. Because even though we are pros and we aren't living in the real world, and when it comes to bike tinkering, brake lines still are terrible to work with. It's still something that I dread doing, and I do wrong every once in a while. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
You know what?
For me, that's where I want it.
People don't even change their pedals. People think that they're going to buy power meter pedals that they'll just like move around from bike to bike. I've talked to so many people who are like, "Oh yeah, they're just stuck on that bike now. I just got a different setup for the other bike."
Yeah. Guys, I think we covered a lot of stuff about suspension. Logan, do you have a takeaway about gravel suspension before we wrap this podcast up?
No, I'm sadly not. Like, I don't feel like I have as much conviction. I wanted to come down on one end or another. I wanted to be like, yeah, I'm not going to change out of gravel suspension like you, Mike. Or I wanted to be like Josh and be like, I've tested all of them. They're not good enough. I'm not. As you can tell from my previous answer, I want my cake and to eat it too. I want the best of both worlds. And that's a fascinating place to be after riding stuff for almost a year. You know, it is really interesting for me to be in a position of, I guess, suspension, because I should have more conviction. I would feel like I did a similar thing with mountain bike tires on gravel bikes, and I was converted. And I was thinking I wanted something similar. You know, I came into this process skeptical, and I'm still skeptical.
Interesting. Okay. Josh, what's your takeaway?
Thank God there's not going to be another Grevil MX, maybe. Hopefully.
That's what I wanted to hear. Let's call it, from now on, we're going to call it the Pinarello overstock, because that's clearly what has happened.
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay. Logan, thank you for the insight into all 3 of those forks and the time you put into testing them. That was super interesting. Lots of time and lots of effort. So everybody go to the Velo homepage, because I think maybe by the time this podcast gets posted, your big article will go up that talks about all of these suspension forks.
I hope so.
Yeah. Josh, thank you for being the counterpoint in this discussion, as always. Wouldn't have it any other way.
I just can't wait to come on to an aero bike episode and just be like, this aero bike is stupid.
Yes.
I don't think I'll feel that way, because I do love aero bikes, but I'm just going to try really hard to be contrarian. Josh and I do have, There are some points where I think I could be counterproductive. We have duked it out in the Instagram comments before. Of
They have
course, with
beef,
respect.
everybody.
Of course, with respect. I've read Josh forever, so I look forward to the next opportunity I can have to maybe debate him on something that's more in his home terrain, home turf.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, Logan, we're definitely going to have you on again in the near future, so be ready for that. Everybody that's listening, thanks for being here for this episode. Put your questions down below about gravel bike suspension, and maybe Logan, maybe myself, maybe even Josh might get in there and answer some questions for you. And tell us what you prefer about suspension, and we will see everybody next episode. Take care.